I know about the fire. I know what you lost. I know what you've been carrying alone.
How could you know?
She ran out into the rain, clutching the money in her hand. "Sir, wait!" The old man turned slowly, rain dripping from the brim of his worn hat. "You left too much," Claire said, breathless. "This is $200. He smiled gently. "I know." "I can't accept this. You don't understand. I'm just a waitress." "Read the note," he said quietly. Claire looked down at the folded paper in her other hand. She hadn't opened it yet. "The note will explain everything," the old man continued, "but only if you're ready to remember." He turned and walked into the rain. Claire stood there, water soaking through her uniform, staring at the folded note. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. Inside, written in careful handwriting, were 5 words that made her heart stop. "I know about the fire." Claire's knees nearly gave out. The fire. Nobody knew about the fire. She'd never told anyone. It happened 23 years ago when she was 7 years old. The night that changed everything. The night she lost her parents. The night she barely escaped. The night she tried every day to forget. How could the stranger possibly know? Claire looked up, searching the rain-soaked parking lot. The old man was gone. Let's go back. 3 hours earlier. Rosie's Diner sat on the edge of Route 47, a lonely stretch of highway where the only visitors were truckers, travelers, and the occasional local who remembered when the place used to be busy. Now it was just quiet, especially on Friday nights. Claire Martinez wiped down the counter for the 3rd time, glancing at the clock, 9:47. Her shift ended at midnight, and so far she'd served exactly 4 customers all evening. The diner was nearly empty, except for the truck driver finishing his coffee in the corner booth and the old man who sat by the window. The same old man who came every Friday night, always alone, always ordered the same thing: turkey sandwich, black coffee, slice of apple pie. Always sat in the same booth by the window, watching the rain. Claire had been working at Rosie's for 6 months, and in that time, the old man had never missed a single Friday. She didn't know his name, he never offered it, and she never asked. But there was something about him, something that made her feel both comforted and unsettled at the same time. He was in his 70s, maybe older, thin with silver white hair and deep lines around kind blue eyes. He wore the same brown coat every week, faded but clean. His hands were weathered, calloused like someone who'd spent a lifetime working. But it was the way he looked at her that stayed with Claire. Not creepy, not inappropriate, just knowing, like he could see something in her that she kept hidden. Claire poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching him in the reflection in the pie case. He was reading a book, an old hardcover with a cracked spine. He always brought one. The bell above the door chimed. Claire looked up. Another customer, a young couple, laughing, shaking rain from their jackets. "Sit anywhere," Claire called, grabbing menus. She served them quickly, burgers, fries, shakes, and returned to her spot behind the counter. The old man was still reading, but now his coffee cup was empty. Claire grabbed the pot and walked over. "Refill?" she asked. He looked up and smiled. "Please." She poured, and he thanked her quietly. Claire hesitated. "You come here every Friday?" He nodded. "I do." "Rain or shine?" "Rain or shine," he agreed. "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. The old man's smile deepened, but there was sadness in it. "Because some promises are worth keeping." Claire frowned. "Promises?" He didn't answer, just returned to his book. Claire walked back to the counter, that strange, unsettled feeling growing stronger. At 11:15, the young couple left. At 11:30, the truck driver paid and headed out. Now it was just Claire and the old man. The diner felt too quiet. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the soft patter of rain against the windows, the distant rumble of a truck passing on the highway. Claire started her closing routine, wiping tables, refilling napkin dispensers, counting the register. At 11:50, the old man stood. He left a $20 bill on the table, tucked under his empty coffee cup. But when Claire went to clear his booth, she froze. Beside the 20 was $200 in crisp bills and a folded note. Claire's heart pounded. $200! That was more than she made in a week. She grabbed the money and the note and ran, out the door, into the rain. "Sir, wait!" And that's where we started. Claire stood in the rain, staring at the note. "I know about the fire." She stumbled back into the diner, water dripping from her hair, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold the paper. She sat in the nearest booth and read the note again. "I know about the fire. I know what you lost. I know what you've been carrying alone. You don't have to carry it anymore. Next Friday, if you want to know more, I'll be here, as always." There was no signature. Claire's chest felt tight, her vision blurred. The fire. She was 7 years old, asleep in her bedroom when the smoke woke her. She remembered her mother's voice screaming her name, her father breaking down her door, the heat, the flames. Her father carried her out. He went back for her mother. Neither of them came out. Claire was raised by her grandmother after that, a kind woman who did her best, but Claire never talked about the fire, never talked about that night. She buried it, and now, 23 years later, a stranger knew. How? Claire looked at the $200 still in her hand. She should give it back. She should report this. She should be afraid. But instead, all she felt was a desperate, aching need to know. Who was he? How did he know? And why now? The next Friday, Claire arrived at work an hour earlier. She couldn't stop thinking about the note, about the old man, about the fire. She'd spent the entire week trying to find answers. She asked the other waitresses if they knew anything about the old man who came every Friday. Nobody did. She asked her manager, Earl, if he had a name, a credit card receipt, anything. "Pays cash every time," Earl said with a shrug. "Quiet guy, tips decent, that's all I know." Claire even tried searching online. Old man, Rosie's Diner, Friday nights. Nothing. It was like he was a ghost. By the time her shift started at 6, Claire's nerves were raw. What if he didn't come? What if I imagined the whole thing? But at exactly 8 o'clock, the bell above the door chimed, and there he was. Same brown coat, same worn hat, same calm, knowing smile. He sat in his usual booth by the window. Claire's heart raced. She grabbed a menu and walked over, trying to keep her hands steady. "Evening," he said pleasantly. "Hi." Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "I'll have the usual, please." Claire nodded, but she didn't move. "Who are you?" The old man looked up at her, his blue eyes gentle. "My name is Thomas." "How do you know about the fire?" Thomas folded his hands on the table. "Because I was there." Claire's breath caught. "What?" "Not during the fire," he said quietly. "After, at the hospital. I was the firefighter who pulled you out." The world tilted. Claire grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. "That's not possible," she whispered. "I don't remember any firefighters. I only remember my father." "You were unconscious by the time we got you out. Smoke inhalation. Your father had already carried you halfway down the street before he collapsed. We took over from there." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "My father went back inside." Thomas nodded, his expression heavy with old grief. "I know. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. He said his wife was still in there." Claire sat down across from him, unable to stand anymore.
"I've thought about you every day for 23 years," Thomas said quietly. "I've wondered if you were okay, if you found a good life, if you were happy." "Why didn't you say anything before?" Claire's voice cracked. "Because I didn't know it was you," Thomas said, "until 2 months ago." Claire frowned. "What do you mean?" Thomas reached into his coat and pulled out a small, faded photograph. He slid it across the table. Claire picked it up, her hands trembling. "That's a picture of a little girl with curly hair holding a stuffed rabbit." Claire's breath stopped. "That's me." Thomas nodded. "Your grandmother gave it to me, years ago, after the fire. She wanted me to have it, to remember. She said you were a miracle." "My grandmother knew you?" "We stayed in touch for a while," Thomas said. "She'd send me updates, let me know you were doing all right. But then, about 10 years ago, the letters stopped. I assumed she'd passed."
Claire's throat tightened. "She did, when I was 20. Thomas's face softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry." Silence settled between them. 2 months ago," Thomas continued, "I saw you here. At first I wasn't sure, you'd grown up, but then I heard another waitress call your name, Claire, and I knew." Claire stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "Why the note? Why the money?" Thomas smiled gently. "Because your grandmother told me something before the letters stopped. She told me you wanted to be a teacher, that you were saving money for college, that you were going to change lives the way your mother did." Claire's mother had been a kindergarten teacher. "But life got in the way, didn't it?" Thomas asked softly. Claire looked down. "I couldn't afford it. After my grandmother died, I had to work. I kept saying I'd go back to school, but years passed and I just kept putting it off." "The money," Thomas said, "is to stop putting it off." Claire shook her head. "I can't take this." "You can and you will." His voice was firm but kind. "Because your father didn't save you just so you could spend your life waiting tables." The words hit like a punch. "He saved you so you could live, really live, the way your mother would have wanted." Claire covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Thomas reached across the table and gently placed his weathered hand over hers. "You've been carrying survivor's guilt for 23 years. It's time to let it go. By the way, I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? What part of the world are you in? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you." Claire came back to work the next Friday, but Thomas wasn't there. She waited, watched the door, kept his usual booth empty, but he never came. At the end of her shift, Claire found an envelope tucked under the cash register with her name on it. Inside was a letter. "Dear Claire, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not far, just home to my daughter's place a few towns over. My health isn't what it used to be, and she's been asking me to move in for years. I'm finally listening. I won't be coming back to Rosie's, but I need you to know something. Your father's last words weren't about the fire. They weren't about your mother. They were about you. He looked at me, barely conscious, and he said, 'Tell her to live. Tell her not to be afraid.' I've carried those words for 23 years, waiting for the chance to say them to you. Now I have. So live, Claire. Go to school. Become the teacher your mother would be proud of. Don't be afraid. And know that every life you touch will be an echo of the love your father had for you. You are not a survivor of a tragedy. You are a miracle born from love. Yours, Thomas." Claire folded the letter carefully and placed it in her pocket. Then she walked to Earl's office and gave her 2 weeks' notice. 18 months later, Claire stood in front of her own classroom for the first time. 23 first graders stared up at her, wide-eyed and curious. She smiled. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Miss Martinez, and I'm so excited to meet you." On her desk was a framed photograph, a little girl with curly hair holding a stuffed rabbit, and beside it, a folded piece of paper. The first note Thomas ever left. I know about the fire. Claire looked at it every day, not as a reminder of what she lost, but as a reminder of what she was saved for. What time is it where you are right now? Morning? Afternoon? Late at night? I'd love to know when you're listening to this story. Drop a comment and tell me. Sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones who pull us from the flames. They're the ones who remind us why we survived. Thomas didn't just give Claire money, he gave her permission. Permission to let go of the guilt. Permission to honor her parents by living fully. Permission to become the person they'd sacrificed everything for her to be. And that, more than anything, was the real gift. The lesson? You don't owe your pain a lifetime. You owe your life a chance. If this story touched you, drop a heart in the comments. Follow for more stories that remind you why hope matters. And if you've ever been given a second chance, don't waste it. Live